My watch is broke. Seems to think it's 2022, but judging by the R5C, clearly it's 2012. So Canon have announced the R5C, which is essentially a normal R5, but with a few changes made to make it more of a cine-focused camera. It's not the first time they've done this. They did it a few years ago with the 1DC, which was a cine variant of the 1DX. At least, to be fair, in Canon's defense, the R5C is a little bit more of a reasonable change. From memory, the 1DC was pretty much a 1DX with a headphone jack and 4K recording and $6,000 extra for the privilege. The R5C's about $600 more expensive than the regular R5, and for that, you're getting identical stills capabilities, but the video specs are somewhat improved. The R5C can do 8K 60 in RAW with supposedly unlimited record times, whereas the original R5 could do 8K 30 in RAW for about 45 seconds. Strangely though, it's got this 8K 60, but they haven't got any ultra-high frame rates, I don't believe. There's no 240, not even in, say, 1080p, which I can only assume is a limit of how quickly the readout speeds of the sensor are, because it's clearly got the processing power to handle it if it can do 8K in 60 RAW. And I think it can also shoot XF AVC format as well, and probably a few other changes. But generally, for the most part, it's just like an R5 with a few beefed up video specs. And there are some other changes. The shutter button on the R5C is now red. And there's a dedicated mode dial that lets you switch from photo modes to stills modes. No, stills is photo modes. From stills modes to video mode. And, as an added bonus, you can't apparently shoot video if you're in stills mode, and you can't take stills if you're in video mode. And there's only about an 8 to 10 second delay from being able to switch between 1 and 2, which is great. You know, I don't think I ever have people been in a situation where they'll be taking stills or something will happen and they'll think, quick, I want to grab a video of that. You don't get that, do you? And you don't want to rush these things. You know, if you ever were in a situation where you suddenly wanted to switch format, you want to take a bit of time. You don't just want to dive headfirst straight into it. No. You want to flick that toggle switch and then you just want to compose yourself. You want to check your Twitter feed and have a look what the local news is doing and what the weather forecast is, and then, and only then, do you truly commit to taking some video footage. And Canon have at least learned from the R5. So when the R5 originally hit, there was the big hype around the fact that it could do 8K 30, and then everyone found it caught fire in a minute, and it took 3 weeks to cool down. Not making that mistake again, are we, Canon? No, because this time they have stuck a stonking great cooling unit onto the back of it. So that has definitely improved the heat capabilities and will improve the record time to the point that they claim that you can get unlimited recording in 8K 60. Except the battery life on it is only rated to be able to do about 40 minutes. Which means if you do want to do any prolonged recording on that camera, you're going to need to be plugged onto the mains. And also quite insanely as well, is apparently the LPE6 battery is not powerful enough to run the camera fully in the highest quality video codecs and still power the lens mount. So if you try shooting on a battery on the highest video settings that's pushing the most amount of data, the lens mount will have no power. Which is fine if you're using a dumb lens, but if you're not, the lens has got no power, which means your autofocus motor is not going to work, your electronic apertures aren't going to work, and if you're using a fly-by-wire lens, which most mirrorless are these days, pretty much all of those manually focus by driving a motor, so presumably that wouldn't work either, so you'd essentially have no functionality of the lens, if I'm understanding it right. The only workaround is to use the mains power in order to get enough power to power the lens mount as well. Because, I mean, the fundamental philosophy of the camera is great. It's going to be ideal for video makers who are more on a budget. It will offer all of the pro level quality and features of higher end cine cameras in a smaller, lighter, more portable camera body that's not as expensive. But that portability and that size are going to be somewhat restricted if you're then having to shoot everything plugged into a main socket. Really though, the biggest killer for this camera is the IBIS system, because it's vanished. They had IBIS in the R5, they've ditched it in the R5C, which I think is remarkably strange. For me personally, I find with the IBIS systems that I've got, they're not that crucial so much for shooting stills. They are beneficial at times, but they are far more beneficial when you're shooting video. So it just seems strange that a feature that I think would be a top priority for a lot of people for a video-focused camera has been removed. Not even neglected. It's not like they're making the camera from scratch and they didn't bother with it. They've taken the R5 and physically removed the IBIS system. Instead, they've got an electronic system which will work alongside the optical system if your lens has it, but it does incur a small crop, or you can put some really high quality one in that does like a 40% crop. But if you're shooting with a lens that doesn't have optical stabilization, such as dumb lenses or most prime lenses, seemingly the electronic system doesn't really do a damn thing. That's where mechanical IBIS would really come into its own. Now, I've heard a couple of reasons as to why they've not potentially included IBIS. One is the thermal efficiency of getting heat from the sensor is improved if there's no IBIS system. If the sensor is mounted straight onto the board, the heat can be pulled off it more effectively than if there's a system, an IBIS system in the way that's then moving the sensor around. Okay. However, surely the heat thermal efficiency would only be a problem with the highest level recording. 8K 60 RAW, for example. So how about just don't have 8K 60 RAW? 8K 30 RAW, 8K 60 non-RAW. I'd imagine a lot of people would prefer to have that and IBIS than 8K 60 RAW and no IBIS. Just speculating there. The other possible reason would be that the mechanical IBIS systems do tend to show, if you're shooting with, say, a really wide-angle lens, you do sometimes get, like, warpy corners. Again, okay, but you don't have to use the IBIS system. Most IBIS systems in cameras you can switch on or off. And I'm sure people have the nous to think, okay, I'm taking a shot here with an ultra-wide-angle lens. I don't want the IBIS system interfering with me. But interfering with the shot, not interfering with you. Although some people would pay a lot of money to have a camera that interferes with them. But, you know, people would have the nous to think, I'm shooting with an ultra-wide-angle lens. The IBIS system's going to be warpy here. I'll switch it off. Rather than the rest of the time that you're not using an ultra-wide-angle lens when you haven't got the choice of an IBIS system. But it is what it is. It's still going to appeal to people, don't get me wrong. It just seems odd that they've opted for removing some of the physical hardware features that would really make the camera more appealing and instead opted for higher video specs. Don't know. Or are we back to this Canon protecting their higher-end cine cameras? God knows. What do you make of the R5C? Let me know in the comments down below. While you're down there, if you haven't already, please consider supporting the channel by clicking the like and subscribe button, and then hopefully we'll see you in the next video.